My shirt is super bright.
My favorite color, hot pink.
I love hot pink.
I'm all
We're
about
live, and I just want to say hello to everyone tonight and welcome you to Blue Wave Conversations. Tonight we have our regulars, Vanessa Maddox, Jamie Nedig, and Kim Newman. But tonight we also have a special guest. She is a professional bad girl. Girl on Fire is the name of her company. And she is, here to share with us tonight her expertise. And we are privileged to have her on the scene. Jody Maki, say hi to the people.
Hey, everybody.
And we are going to dive straight in. We've got a lot of things to discuss tonight. And we just want to be able to get all of that information in. So without further ado, Vanessa happens to know Jody very, very well. And I don't think there's anyone better that we can get tonight to introduce the lady of the hour who's going to guide us through this conversation about crimes against women in America. So take it away, Vanessa.
Good evening, Facebook and all of the other channels that we are on. Vanessa Maddox, CEO of VR Maddox Consulting, LLC. And it is my honor and pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Jody Maki, to the show tonight. Jody and I met back in 2017.
So
I think. I'm so bad at years. But anyway, we were introduced by a mutual friend who said to me, V, I met this wonderful woman and you gotta meet her. I said, look, Freddie, I don't have time to be meeting nobody. What are you talking about? So we all went to lunch. Freddie and I used to work together. And we all went to lunch and I immediately fell in love with her. We clicked instantly and the rest is history. But I would like to add that Jody is, and first of all, she's very humble, but I will brag for her. Jody is the top foremost firearms safety instructor nationally and internationally. So if you see some FBI agents walking around the street, she trained them, okay? And when you talk about a badass, she is one, but she is also a survivor. She's a mom, she's a businesswoman, she's an entrepreneur, she's a CEO. But she's also the person that showed me that I too can be trained in firearm safety, and I too can learn to handle a firearm, and I too can get my concealed carry license in Virginia, and I too can get a 32 state concealed carry license, which I will have shortly. But one real thing that I learned through all this whole process with working with Jody is that even though I never touched a firearm until last year of my life, now I understand why there's so many freaking gun nuts in this country. I get it now. I totally get it. Because when you hold that thing in your hand and you're taught by someone that is so good that you hit 3 bullseyes your first time firing a gun in your life. That's how good she is. So without further ado, my good friend and someone who has the best hair in America, Miss Jody Maki.
thank you so much. Thank you. And you rocked, by the way. Absolutely. Yeah, but you know, Vanessa speaks to something that I hear a lot from women, because there's a long process for us when it comes to deciding to even touch a firearm in most cases. And there are many different drivers for that. And I'm not an advocate for everybody to have a gun. I'm an advocate for personal safety, and everybody should have access to proper training in order to be able to keep their families and themselves safe. And the gun can be an absolute shooting sport. It's a sport, and women are amazing at shooting because we have great fine motor skills and we listen. We don't have the ego. and so women are really good shooters once they learn the proper way. And so I'm a big advocate on training people properly, but also just giving women a good understanding of all of the facets of what it means to have a firearm. And it's not just about the safety. This can also be fun, and it can be a pastime, and we can get good at it because there's a lot of different validation you get out of actually firing a firearm.
Well, that's exciting because I too took Jody's class. I also took another class too, because I wanted to make sure that I got everything that I could possibly get. I'm a school of always making sure that I have more than enough information, because sometimes that's what it takes for me. So I actually went through a training class twice. And I tell you, when I went to the range, I haven't gone to the range with Jody yet, so I'm hoping that'll happen because I'll be really excited about that. I have to agree with Vanessa. The first, just the first initial shock, people got to really understand when you fire for that very first time, it is a shock to your system, and you if you have a conscience, you really start to think about, wow, this is serious business. This is responsibility. This is, it really is a weight of responsibility. But when you're trained properly, you can see it as, you know, you're going to the range and learning target practice and having fun with it and those types of things. Jody, I would like you to kind of talk tonight about your experience using it more as a defense mechanism for protecting, which is what you instruct on. It's not for going out there and doing some of the things we've seen in the news recently.
Right.
And I'd like to talk about that too, because I think those assault rifles need to be taken off the market, but that's just me. But if you could kind of speak to just what's been going on and how your training in self-defense and things like that would help, maybe our audience will have some questions for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's not about the gun necessarily. It's about so many levels of things that you can go through to be able to protect yourself, to hopefully not have to use a gun. My training is, I don't want you to use it, but we're going to learn about all of those other prevention methods.
Did we just lose Jody for a sec?
I think she's frozen.
Yeah, she froze for a second.
There she
Sorry.
is.
Sorry.
There you go.
Your hair does look great when you freeze, though. You look better frozen, like even no awkward face, than I look like when I'm looking natural.
Thank you. I think my video is off all of a sudden. Am I back? Okay. So when it comes to the firearm, truly it's about training and understanding. And what's interesting when it comes to training women, a lot of times the women after their first shot will cry because there's so much negative association with the firearm. And when we're looking at all the violence that's happening, that really contributes to our emotion when we realize how powerful this is and all of the negative things that can be done with it. At the same time, the fear is driving women to purchase firearms because they're worried. They're worried about the world. They're worried about the increased crimes that they're seeing happening in their neighborhoods. We're seeing increases in home invasions. There's so many different things that are happening within the world. The human trafficking situation is getting out of control. And if you look at the numbers, it's really disturbing. Like, I cried when I saw the map, because it's unbelievable how close these crimes are coming to us and to our families. And so we have to do something to be responsible for our own personal safety. And whether that be pepper spray or a tactical pen or flashlight watches or a firearm, but we need to have something so we don't feel so vulnerable.
Yep.
Yeah,
I know one thing in the class that was taught was, you know, when somebody comes into the home, let's say there's a home invasion, there's a lot of thought process that goes into that.
Absolutely.
Would you like to go into some of that? Because we may have people, I don't know if you're watching and you have questions for Jody, please feel free to put them in the chat. One of us will catch it and make sure that we read it out for you. If you're thinking about taking a firearm class and don't know where to go or anything like that, Vanessa just posted not only Jody's link, but I think there's a class in Herndon or something like that coming up. So get your questions answered now while we have the expert. But could you speak to the thought process that happens? Because that is amazing. You just can't run in the room, get a gun and start firing. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we go into the action of that, I want to talk about the statistics. So we have 2,000 home invasions, one every 13 seconds. And in the Baltimore area, this is increasing. And in the Delaware area, this is increasing. I don't know why those particular areas, but I'm seeing a lot. Almost every single class that I teach up and down the East Coast, at least one person in every class has had a home invasion. That's scary. And so this is a reality for us now. And what are we doing about it? And I think that when people get firearms, they immediately have a false sense of safety and think they're bulletproof. And I find that a lot, that they come in the class and think I'm going to get a gun and I'm good. And just because you have one doesn't mean that you're competent with it. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to hit your intended target with all the stress and adrenaline and all these things that are coming into play. And so there's multiple levels of things that I like people to put into place when they get their firearm. Number one, buying a safe that's not accessible to anybody. That's our number one, making sure that we have responsible gun owners and handlers, because I see all these people buying these firearms. They do not have training. They do not have a safe place to keep that firearm. And they might not be at risk of shooting the community, but if they keep that gun accessible, they have a break-in and somebody breaks in and takes that gun and shoots the community, they're going to be responsible for that mass shooting as well. And so there's a lot of thought process that needs to go into this when we're thinking about bringing those firearms into our homes. And if you imagine the average crime happens on Thursday afternoon, is that surprising to y'all? Like, we don't really hear that.
It is.
Yeah, we typically have heightened awareness in the evenings, right? We're looking around, making sure it's Thursday afternoon. And in the majority of those people that were in those classes of mine that had home invasions, it happened Thursday afternoon. So it was validated. It's very strange. But when we think of that, where are you on Thursday afternoon? You're probably in your kitchen, you're in your living room working. They're just banging down the door and there you are. Your firearm is locked in your safe in your bedroom. How are you going to get there? Right? So we need to think about that. I always call it a smart defense strategy, because it's not self-defense, because we're going to have to protect ourselves criminally and civilly, as well as trying to keep ourselves alive. Right? And so if somebody breaks in the middle of the day, where am I strategically placed less than lethal options so that I can get to my safe location with my firearm potentially in that room? And so that's one of the things that I want people to think about, because I have had multiple people that I've trained who thought that they were ready. They were doing this specifically to make sure that they could protect their homes and their families. And there was one particular woman who has children, little small children, and her and her husband both have been really training, getting into it, wanting to make sure they're doing their diligence with everything. And they ended up having somebody trying to get into their door of their home in the middle of the day. and banging down the door. They're calling 911. They're trying to grab the children, figure out they're completely all over the place, not sure what they're doing. And she said, we thought we were ready. We are not ready at all. Because when it legitimately happens, if you haven't practiced drills to understand where everybody's going, what are you doing? Is everything accessible for us to call 911? Is our phone charged? Where is it? Right? Where is our firearm? Is it locked? Can I easily access it if I need to? What is my process? You know, again, so everything I'm throwing out, because there's not a perfect recipe, because it's going to be based on the people, on your environment, on your neighbors, there's multiple levels of things to think about here. So it's about food for thought, so that I challenge everyone to go home and think about what is our best plan if something were to happen. And our number one is to get a code word, and that everybody knows. And so that if you yell the code word, everybody knows what to do. Because especially if you have family where you have children, you don't want to have to go through the house trying to find those children to make sure they're safe if you know there may be a gunman in the home. So if you've practiced this, one of my favorite less than lethal options is a doorstop alarm, is what it's called. And Amazon has it. It's on my website. I have a store that you can click directly to it. Looks like Vanessa has hers. And when you have the doorstops, your kids can have them in their rooms, and immediately they hear the code word. They put the doorstop in the door, have another one in the closet, lock the closet, lock themselves in the closet, put another doorstop there so that the bad guy can't get in. And then you don't have to worry about where are the kids and where do I go if you can't get to their room, right? So just some things to think about as you're trying to plan your own home defense strategy.
Jody, I just wanted to say really quickly, I think you brought up a great point about there's many layers that we have to go through before we get to a space where we say this is the step that we want to take. I know for me, it's more defensive strategy. I had a fear of guns and that whole environment. And so, especially in recent years in becoming a mom, and like you said, worrying about how do I protect my family, I kind of hit a wall with, I can't be afraid of what may potentially, enter into my space. So worst case scenario, if somebody does come in with a gun, how am I going to defend myself if I'm afraid to even touch it? And so that's where I thought I needed to kind of get more comfortable, learn the process, learn the proper way to disengage it. But especially in recent years, there has been, at least in my mind, a real attack on women and women's safety and women's protections. And, we have to take more of a role on protecting ourselves. And I think that come the future, it's only going to get more poignant a conversation. So.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for that. And it's getting over the fear of the firearm, because even if you don't have it in your own home, knowing how to use it, because what if the bad guy comes in, you are able to disable them somehow, and the gun's on the floor. If you have no idea what you're doing, now that can be potential negligence to put yourself in danger again. So just knowing how to use one is really important. If there's some shooting in some mall and somebody throws one on the ground, you know how to deal with it, so that maybe you could save the day, or at least protect yourself so you're not so vulnerable. And when we look at, women in general, we do have that vulnerable place automatically because we're women. And so if men know that we're not prepared, then it's harder. We have a harder time. If we are ready, they're not expecting us to be ready, and then we're at a better advantage place. And so it's trying to think about, what are my go-tos here, because the body cannot go where the mind has never been. So if we don't think anything bad is going to happen to us, it's going to happen to my neighbor, it's going to happen to somebody else, then either we freeze and we don't do anything, or we do something that may or may not be effective to get us out of that situation. So just even having that go-to here of, what can I do so that I'm not so vulnerable? Where's my tools, right? What are they? Where are they located? Or if I'm out and about, is it in my hand? And I had a woman that I literally just talked to today who decided that she wants to continue to take the path to become an instructor, because she actually had a recent threat. She was literally just out walking her dog, and she ended up having this strange car just kind of sitting there watching her. And so she decided, you know what, I have a different route I can take here where my really loud or is really long. So, well, we just lost her. The neighbor's driveway is really long, so she thought that she could go ahead and just walk through the driveway and go through the backyard. She said that she saw him driving slowly, still trying to find her, so she hid behind a tree. She didn't have anything on her person other than a little small dog that wasn't going to save her. And from there, she just kind of waited, and the guy kept circling. And finally, she was able to run and get into her home and then call law enforcement. And they said, well, did he touch you? Did he threaten you? Did he assault you? And her answer is no, but she was completely threatened by the whole situation. But she was also very vulnerable because she didn't have any way to defend herself. And so when we look at these situations, the police come later to take the pictures. They're not there when it happens. We again need to be responsible for our own personal safety. And now we don't even know if they're coming because of all of the crazy that is happening within law enforcement. Some of them are even being told to stand down because they don't want the potential liability issues that are coming along with going to some of these calls. So now it's more important than more than ever because they might not come till tomorrow. And what do we do in the meantime?
That's interesting. Anybody else have anything for Jody on that right now? I know I saw someone in the I think it was Cheryl in the comments said that that's when hers happened. I guess she had an invasion and it was on a Thursday.
Wow.
You know, it's interesting. I want to see how this relates to women. How do we before we even get to the firearms, you mentioned there were other tools and ways and things to do it because you just can't go on your job blazing, right? So when you have an issue at work, right? And let's say it's harassment, let's say, you know, it's your boss or it's your supervisor or whatever. How do you diffuse that situation? Because I think when we first connected, you were talking about defining these crimes, that sexual harassment is a crime, rape, it's a crime. Do you want to speak to that a little bit more? Because I found that was one of the things that you pointed out for your topics that I found really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, bullying should also be classified as a crime. And we're talking about that within our organization to try to get that written into a law. Because we're seeing the active shooters come out because they've been bullied over the years, over and over. And because those people can't be criminally charged, they keep going, you know, until it's too late. And so bullying, any type of discrimination that we see, domestic violence, all of that is a crime because it's taking away that person's sense of freedom and ability to do what they want to do in the world. And that's really when we look at crime in general, it's your freedom's being taken away somehow. Because once you're put in that vulnerable position, you don't feel like you can go about the world like everywhere else. And when we talk about fear in the workplace, we see this with discrimination, with women, with minorities, with sexual orientation. It's happening everywhere. We've experienced it as women forever. And we've just learned to live with it or tried to figure out ourselves how to overcome it, but we're continuing to see it. And we're seeing it within our community because of people's fear of losing their status, right? Women are becoming more and more powerful within the business world and corporate world and government. And as we continue to move forward, men are losing their role, right? And they're not sure what to do with it. And so we're going to continue to see that power struggle of that control situation. And they're taking advantage of that within workplaces because that's where they can try to put that control into play. And so when we talk about the interactions that we're having with these people, it may or may not be easy to just report it because of the repercussions that we may be able to end up having, right, as people within that place that have to go there every single day or every week. And so it's us being smarter. And I always say, you know, it's never self-defense, it's smart defense, because we need to be smarter than the criminal. And that's what's going to help us be able to protect ourselves. So if we're smarter than that person that's trying to put us down, right? we're kind of, I don't want to say maneuver, but we're kind of trying to be a little bit smarter than them so that we can still end up in that higher level place that we're trying to get to without being stopped. And if you can preempt their behavior, because we can write their playbook, we really know what it is. They all have the same, the narcissists, the abusers, all of these people that are abusing power, they all have a lot of similarities, and they talk from the same playbook. And there's a perfect book that I love, and it's called The Verbally Abusive Relationship. And if anybody has an opportunity, I'd love for you to read that. It's also on my website, because it really gives their playbook so that you can read the signs and see them and get validated if you're being put down by one of those verbally abusive people. But in terms of your ability to deal with them, since you know you're able to preempt that bad behavior so that you can put things in place to still prevail. And again, it's us being smarter than that criminal. And I think Jamie has recently had a situation where she has been essentially bullied in a lot of ways within the social media realm. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, and I also wanted to put this in context too, for any woman who's experienced sexual harassment. I put in the comments on Mary's page, it's 81% of women. So you are not alone in this. It is not your fault. You didn't do anything to make this. It's 81% of women and have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. So that doesn't happen. But I did recently have a situation where I'm embroiled in a controversy of sorts. And an organization, which is, as far as I know, one person, but he tweeted out a document with my home address on it. And the situation I'm in is full of, involves people who make comments such as they want to burn liberals alive in their homes, or these shooting people in the face are some of the comments, hooding us, kidnapping, and driving us 1,000 miles away from our home and deprogramming it. So these are some pretty scary people. To be clear, these things were not said by the guy who tweeted out my home address, but he tweeted out my home address, a document with my home address on it. So, this is really, really scary. And the long story short is I made a comment that I felt like other tweets he made were emboldening these people who were coming after us. And I don't know that he knew that there were threats before then. I have no way of knowing. I would assume that he watches all the Twitter stuff. He's on Twitter 24/7, who knows? But, having heard me say that, his response was to tweet out a document with my home address on it, knowing that this is being riled up in this way. And so I'm a single mom. I have 3 kids at home. And now I am trying to figure out how to best protect my children. Is it even safe for me to walk my dog, for my kids to walk my dog? And I'm comfortable with firearms. My dad's a retired Marine. I don't remember the first time I filed one. If there was a feeling of crying or fear, I don't remember it. So I'm very comfortable with weapons, but what I'm not comfortable with is now how vulnerable I feel, because I don't know what to expect from any of these people who now they know where I live and they're angry. If you're angry enough to talk about burning people alive in their homes, and I don't feel like there's really a lot of legal remedies for me to deal with this. I am not a politician. I am a private person. And now I'm the face of something inadvertently that has made me really fear for myself and my children. So if you have any ideas and I can't be the only person that this has happened to, where you get this crazy online community who's now big mad. And it's no coincidence to me that they're going after women.
And I think that this likens itself a lot to stalking in a lot of ways. Because when you're stalked, you're constantly being monitored in different ways. They're finding out where you live. They're trying to threaten you to feel that fear. And I deal with women in these situations all the time, and it's gotten worse and worse because of the easy access to people. And if you want to put your voice out there in a bigger way, and you want to try to make a difference, it's also a double-edged sword, because now you're all making yourselves vulnerable to those crazies that are also out there that want to terrorize those people so that their voices are not heard. And so there's this battle that we have, and with the stalking and with some of these things, one of the biggest things that needs to be done immediately is the documentation of every single thing, and it needs to be filed as a police report. You don't have to charge them and have them go to their house immediately. So people kind of have that fear of, I don't think I should call the police because it's not that serious yet. No, you need to have a record in the police department, because when they cry and say, you were the bad guy, not them, you will already have that in front of them, so that there's a track record of their bad behavior, and that's all proof that can be used in court later if it gets to that place. So documenting everything, but immediately calling and saying, I would like to file a police report on this particular person, and this was the behavior, and I'm sending you the documents, please put this in a file, and have them keep it. And continue to have that every single time, and not be afraid to call. And if you can get one designated officer that can specifically be your person, then they're familiar with your case, so they'll take action because they've already been privy to the escalation of their bad behavior. Because what I find is that when people don't report, they don't have that go-to person within the department, so nobody knows their situation, or if they're calling different people, that you're starting over and they don't understand the seriousness of it because they weren't able to view that whole situation. So if you're able to find one and say, can you please be my primary contact, then they have a vested interest to also make sure that you're staying safe in different ways. And so I feel like for you, especially now, because of your family, because it's easy to find anybody's address, whether we publish it out there or not, it's very difficult to be off the grid right now. We're all on there. And so if somebody really wanted to find us, they could, but hopefully based on us being strong and putting out there that, you know, we do have our measures in place, we are not vulnerable. You may think we are, but we're not, because the fear is what drives them. And I'm not going to show them fear, because we're strong and we can defend ourselves perfectly fine. And we're not going to allow them to go over the law, right? And when we talk about terroristic threat, and I'm going to talk a lot about this in some upcoming videos, because there is a terroristic threat law that you cannot place someone in imminent fear, or that is a misdemeanor charge. We do not have it written in code for online threats, unfortunately. And this is holding the agencies back from taking action. And so I believe this is something we all need to be lobbying for, because we see everybody putting out terroristic threats online now. They are placing people's lives they're just, everybody's in fear. And so if we can stop that from happening, it's not free speech. This is about humanity and people having the ability to live free without being in fear. This has nothing to do with free speech. That has crossed a line.
Yeah.
I was wondering this. Do you have or do you keep track, I guess I should say, of women who have taken your class that are single moms versus married women? And what does that look like? Do you keep those types of information?
I guess I don't have a specific statistic of that, but I can tell you from what I know that is many. They're taking it and getting firearms because they feel like they're kind of on an island and they don't have that support if something were to happen. Women will get into firearms if it's about protecting their family, not just for themselves, but their family will be a driver, especially if they're a single mom. I do see an increase. And in terms of my classes overall, it used to be about 60-70% men. Now it's about 50-50, if not sometimes more women. And so our whole landscape is changing right now. And I'm happy to see that the women are training. And that's the difference really between men and women that I see. Men really don't feel like they need training. That's a gun. I play video games. What do I need to know? And women don't even want to touch a gun until they've actually had a training course. You even said, I've taken extra classes because I want to make sure that I know how to do this safely. We do our diligence, but we don't see that on the other side. And so I'm seeing more and more women, and I'm happy that they're getting educated.
So in addition, I'm sorry, Kim, go ahead.
Oh, no, just really quickly to that point. How about in regards to minorities? What does that look like as far as, the influx? I know that in past times, not to say it was a faux pas, but it was more like, oh, this conversation that's far off. I know in recent years it's been, becoming more in the forefront of, do we have those proper protections in our community, especially in times where we are, a direct, and being directly threatened. Have you seen an influx in that space, in that demographic?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, there's a number of my classes in a particular market where the majority are minorities. Yes. And there used to be kind of this feeling of being torn about whether or not I want to do it because the community has been touted as violent, or the parents have said, this is bad, that's for the violent people, you can't do it. They've been very hesitant about getting deeper into that for themselves. But that is changing as well, because now they feel like they don't have a choice. They're seeing the threat so close to them that they want to make sure that they're staying safe. And I'm also seeing this turn in my instructor level courses, where we have a lot of minorities wanting to be instructors so that they can train their minority community, because they want to make sure that they're also getting access to that training, getting it done in a good way.
Got it.
Can I ask too? I mean, I think guns are absolutely important for home defense, but what else can we do to try to keep from having to use them? Because one of the things I've been very much warned of is, even if I shoot somebody in self-defense, I'm probably going to end up with a wrongful death suit, whether it was wrongful or not. Lawyer's gonna lawyer. So what other things can we do? Because now that I'm going through this, I've had folks, I mean, a huge thank you to everybody in my community who's reached out and helped, but talk to me about how it's important now that I'm worried about this, to put a no trespassing sign in my lawn, because the police can't by law enforce this without that. And people have now recommended that I get unbreakable glass film for them, because I have one of those doors with glass on it. And I did, when this happened, I bring cameras. I can see everything all around my house. But they're very visible cameras. I was told to make them very, very visible as a deterrent. Do deterrents work? What should we be doing? Because we want to use that gun as a last resort. Don't get me wrong. If somebody's in my house, my babies are in there. My father has always told me that you should aim for the chest. It's the biggest, it's the easiest to hit, and you double tap. But he's a Marine. My babies are in here, but I'm his baby. But what else? Because I mean, I don't want to ever have to shoot someone in self-defense. I want to keep them out of my home. I don't want to have my kids have to see that.
And I think that, the no trespassing, or do they really care about that? I don't think so. But legally, I think you need that there for the legal aspect of that. The alarm systems, like I worry about all of the Ring and all these softwares, because the hackers can easily hack into that, and now they're watching you in your home. So the outside cameras, absolutely, but the inside ones, I don't know. I'm really hesitant, because I actually had a client whose husband was robbed at a certain point, and they getting his phone with their security system in the phone, and he was watching them in their house before they could disable everything. Also got access to his social media, and started to stalk her sister that he was connected to within social media, and they were trying to use the sister's house as a safe house, because he then knew where they lived, because he got their driver's license and the keys and all. I mean, all of these things in terms of the technology are tools for us, but they're also tools for the bad guys, and they ultimately can be used against us. And so the security systems, you have to be careful. But
what you said there, I want to make sure that we all hear this, is outside cameras are an absolute yes. It's the inside cameras that could actually make us vulnerable.
Yes, because in the outside camera, if they want to watch that, I really don't care. They're going to watch movements whether they watch them or not. I'm not as concerned about that as I am with them hacking it and watching your movements inside your home, and then getting the layout of your home and too much information that we don't need them to see. And not using a firearm, I think that it's critical information to know. It takes an average of 7 seconds for someone to realize they've been hit by a bullet. That's a long time, especially if you're in close proximity with that person. Pepper spray is now. If you are pepper sprayed, your hands go to your eyes and your face. Once they rub it in, they breathe it in, they are down for 45 minutes. And so pepper spray is going to be one of your best tools. Now, you also need to make sure that you don't get a lot of it so that you're not also disabled along with the bad guy. And so if so it's training with that, just like you would train with any other tool, but that's something that's going to buy you time to get to your safe place.
Okay, I'm going to ask the dumb question, and bear with me. I'm only strawberry blonde, not even a real one. So
I'm sure it's not as dumb as the question I got. But go
okay,
ahead.
so everybody's wearing masks now. So if you spray somebody with pepper spray and if they come up in the street, they might have a mask on, like a mask on. Will that still work if they've got a mask on?
Their eyes are exposed, yes, and they're going to eventually breathe it through that, yes. But the eyes, especially, because that's where you're going, is the eyes, and the eyes are going to burn. Like pepper spray is miserable if anybody's sprayed. Like, it is unbelievable. And
so we aim for the eyes then, not like for the chest, or aim for the eyes.
Eyes and over the eyes and nose, but if you can do that, but it's mostly just getting it over the eyes, but you're retreating as you're doing it so you can get the minimal amount yourself. And I encourage people, when they buy it, put some gloves on, spray some in your hands, and just bring it really close to your face, because I want you to experience some of the effects. You don't have to spray yourself, but I want you to experience some of it so you know what to expect, because then you're not going to be as disabled. Like, you'll be able to kind of fight through it because you know what's happening.
I had a boyfriend in college who accidentally sprayed himself with my little pocket mace my dad got me. It did not go well for him. It was like an hour till he was like back to normal. Like, even the next day he had some red.
Totally works. And the one point of note here, though, is that it needs to be law enforcement grade. There are many that are out there, and if they are not strong enough, they won't work, especially with adrenaline and all these other things that come into play. And when it comes to even just mace in general, I had a woman who recently was in a domestic violence situation. She used mace and it didn't work, and he ended up disabling her. She has no movement in her entire right arm. She's got nerve damage everywhere. She was trying to figure out if she could have a firearm because she wasn't able to use her right arm, and it was because it didn't work.
But how do we know it's law enforcement grade? Is there, like, I know it was like the FDA who goes in and says it, or how do we know?
Saber Red is the brand that I recommend, and because they're law enforcement grade, you can find them everywhere. They're selling at Bass Pro Shops, at Walmart's. They're on Amazon. I have them on my link on my website as well. But Saber Red is the one that you want. And if for people that drive, like Uber drivers, and for people that have maybe inside types of jobs where it may not be good to have an actual spray that's going to go into the air, they have a gel one. And so the gel would be great for inside a car and things like that, because you don't want to get it done in a car, right? You're going to be disabled and go down with that person. So trying to find the right one for your environment, that whether or not you're working in or whatever. But pepper spray is legal in all 50 states.
And that's Saber with an S, like Samuel, Saber Red.
BRE, yes, Saber Red. And
in the chat.
It's legal in 50 states, but there are certain states that require you get a permit for your pepper spray, DC being one of them.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think that's ridiculous, but
wow.
Yeah.
Do you have to take, now my dumb question was, do you have to take a class to use?
No, you can't. There are those classes that you can take, but you don't have to take a class. You can buy practice pepper spray, and Saber Red has one, because then you can understand how it deploys. Like, I'm not happy with deployment systems on most of them, because you have to use fine motor skills to deploy it, and in high stress adrenaline, you typically lose those skills. And so if you know that you are coming towards a potential threat situation, even if I'm walking in a parking lot, I'm walking by myself, I'll have it locked, cocked, ready. My thumb is on the trigger and it's just ready in my hand. And then when I get in my safe place, I'll put it back. But that's what you're practicing, is disabling it so that you're able to access it quickly. And then putting up your non-dominant hand as you're spraying, so that, again, you're minimizing your exposure. But, you can take classes, absolutely. But I find you just practice it in the backyard with the practice spray, so you can understand how to deploy it properly, but also how fast you're going to retreat out of there so you're not breathing it.
Okay, that sounds good. Anybody have any questions, other questions for Jody?
I wanted to ask now, I read about that thing about how you put your keys between your hands. All I have at my right now with me is a barrette because I'm by the pool. But
Oh, I heard about that.
then I heard that you should take them and you should do it this way with your key. That way you can't have it turned. I mean, that thing, because I always walk to my car with my keys between my hands like that is, but then I saw this thing on doing it this way. Is there a right way, a wrong way? Is that even effective? I mean, I was told to do that and go for the eyes, but
I think either way is going to work. And
that's important. That's a crucial piece of information that I've been carrying my keys in my hands for 47 years for no reason.
Yeah, I don't think it's really going to work and be effective in those situations. I want you to think about throwing something underwater, right? When you have your adrenaline surge and different things happening, you're in slow motion and things aren't working the same. And when it comes to having your keys just being held, I don't think that it's going to help much. And also, if they're stronger than you, they're going to catch you before that even happens. My goal is to never get that close, because you're at a much more vulnerable place if you are getting into that close proximity situation. You want to have that 21 feet awareness so that you don't have to get that close, because your chances are decreasing at that point because they're bigger than you, stronger than you, already know that what they're going to do and have a plan. So there's a lot of advantages they have. So, keeping that distance. But taser and stun gun situation, I want to talk about those really quickly, because a lot of women have a false sense of safety because they're also choosing that as their primary defensive option. The tasers that civilians are legally able to possess have 1.5 million to 25 million watts. The law enforcement grade taser has 300 million watts. So that civilian one to the bad guy is going to feel like a bug bite. And I just made him angry. And I thought that was going to be what helps me defend myself. And they also did a study recently that showed when somebody had a taser, the offender ran faster towards them to disable the victim so that they didn't get tased. So it does absolutely the opposite of what I want, because you'll see commercials of say, if you just make the noise of the taser, it'll scare away the bad. No, they're coming after you faster so that you can't.
So it's giving them superpowers. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah.
So I'm so thankful you said that, because I am one of those women. And so I have my little noise taser that, doesn't do much. It just makes it seem like it does. So I will throw it away as soon as we finish. But I did want to ask, of course, I want to find out more information about your classes, because I'll probably be one of the first people off this call to register. But two, I always find, ironically, that the narcissist is the one that always has the most resources. They know who to call. They know how they can get a PR, private investigator. They know how they can find out information. Is there a place that women can go to get access to all of those links, all of those numbers? So in case they find themselves in this emergency, like to Jamie's point, to Jamie's issue, there's a go-to of all the areas that she can either learn how to do this, talk to someone who can support her, get help, whatever.
That's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is no. And I have had so many women call me, and when I give them all of these levels of action they can take, they say to me, you were the first one that has been able to help me. That is such a sad statement to me. Like, why not? Where are all the resources that are supposedly out there? And I'm not seeing them. And because most organizations only go so far. They're not everything to everybody. They're just doing this one little segment, and they are very restricted on what they can do, use for their tools. So I am looking at it as a broader net that we need to access all of these tools to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. So they can call me, right, at this point, because we do have all of those resources and connections to all of these groups and these people, because there's different levels of where people may be at in terms of their situation and their threat. And so it always kind of evolves. And so there's not a go-to to say, okay, here's where I am, so here's who I should call. There's not really that out there, and there should be that. But I haven't really seen that. And when it comes to even like Jamie's situation, and thank you for bringing up the private investigator, when we talk about stalkers and things like that, we always advocate for you getting your own private investigator so that you can start investigating them on the back end. And as you're collecting information, that will also help you with, especially if they even know that they're being investigated, right? Because they don't want that person stalking them either. Well, guess what? We're coming back after you, right? And that turns the tables a little bit and makes everything look a little bit different. Again, because we're trying to be in that power position because we're smarter, right? But again, thank you for that question. And unfortunately, no. And so I will be happy to have any of those people call us directly, because we will guide them to those steps. And we actually have a document that talks about, if you're stalked, here are some steps that you need to take. Here are some things we need to do. Also, if you're in a domestic violence situation, on some specific things, and in recognizing signs of the abuser, hopefully before they get into it. And we use this a lot for college campuses, because these women get in these situations when they're young and get in a pattern, and it's very hard to get out. And so nobody is really out there putting some of these critical education out. So I decided that we really need to do something and do that then ourselves. And so what I'll try to do, I don't have those documents yet out on my website, but I'll try to put them on there so that people can download that PDF and have it accessible, because I believe that it's something that people should be able to get as a resource for themselves, to at least get some tools right away on what to do.
Yeah, and just to like the parent tree ideology, the mentality, partnerships, maybe getting you connected with other organizations that support women who are finding themselves in these situations, so that we can start connecting those dots. This person works with this person, we can get you to this person. So putting that together, I think, is a great suggestion of solution.
Absolutely, because again, one of the things that I continue to talk about is that women, we truly need to be a community, because we're all in the same boat. and we end up competing with each other.
Say that again for the women in the back, please.
Way in the back.
Yeah, but we need to be a community and support each other and make sure that we're hearing what's going on, so that we can help. And our community's gone away from helping, because we don't want to take responsibility, because we don't want to risk ourselves and our own safety, because we don't know what kind of levels of crazy are going on over here. But that can't happen anymore, because the more we continue to turn that blind eye, the more we see these shootings happen because nobody's doing anything. The more we see more women get into domestic violence situations, not be able to get out. The more we see people silently suffering in these stalking situations because they don't know what to do, because no one else will help them, right? If we are coming together as women, then we can support each other with our own resources and giving that mental support, which is ultimately the most important to keep us in that strong place, so we can be smarter than the criminal.
I'd like to add a couple points. For those of you out there that are anti-gun and aren't necessarily interested in getting a firearm, at least take the training. You don't have to buy a gun, okay, ever. So if that is a fear, that's fine. Nobody's telling you to go out and do that. But what we are telling you to do is be aware, be smart, know your surroundings, know who your neighbors are and what they do, so you can be educated and ready. That's all we're saying. And I've known Jody a long time, and every time I see her or talk to her or go to something she's hosting, I hear she tells 5 or 10 new stories about women that have been attacked by people they know and people they don't know. So we want to cut down the amount of stories that Jody has to tell, okay? She offers common sense solutions. She offers non-lethal options. And I just want to tell you guys a quick story. So I went to Jody's session 2 weeks ago, and I was riding home, and I called a girlfriend of mine. I said, hey, I just went to Jody's class, blah, blah, blah. And she talked about non-lethal options. And she said, V, what is that? And so I told her. She said, oh, I got a non-lethal option. If somebody busts in my house, I'm grabbing my AK and I'm shooting their head off. Okay, ma'am, that's fine. But Jody, can you talk a little bit about the Castle Doctrine so that you can educate these people that think they're going to blow the person's head off when they walk through their door? Castle Doctrine does not exist every state. Can you talk about that, please?
And it does not, and Virginia specifically does not have Castle Doctrine. And Maryland does have it, but I wouldn't use it per se in that way, because Maryland has so many laws that they're going to come up with something anyway. Castle Doctrine means your home is your castle. You can protect yourself in your home. But in Virginia, we have a duty to retreat. So every state is different. Their laws are all different. Just because somebody comes in does not mean you can shoot them and you're going to be legally not responsible for that. Even if you do get off on the criminal charges, you're going to be sued by their entire family. And because we're so litigious, they're going to find ways to be able to take you down. And now you're going to lose also everything that you own, trying to protect yourself and your family. I am worried right now because all of these people have gone out in fear and purchase whatever firearms they could find because they're worried about what's happening to our world. They didn't get the training, right? They're buying shotguns and rifles and all these things that may or may not be good for home defense, because the average bullet travels 1 mile and most people aren't aware of that. And so as they're not knowing what they're doing with the gun they have, they just shot their neighbors, right? Their neighbors come in drunk into their house instead of theirs, and they shot now their neighbor, now they're done. Right? We need to do our diligence and make sure that we know what we're doing with these firearms, but not assuming that it's the bad guy coming in. We need positive target identification. Again, there's so many levels of training here that should happen to make sure that you're making a proper decision. And with adrenaline and fear, because we're all fear-based already, everybody's here with their fear right now, more so than ever before. So if somebody breaks in and by mistake, they're going to assume that it's the bad guy, and they just shot and killed him with their shotgun that they just bought from the local whatever store, because that was what they were able to get quickly. But by the way, that bullet traveled through 3 neighbors' homes and killed children and other people as well. You know, there's many considerations here, and I think that you talked about, you know, the AR and things like that. We talk about guns in general. To me, it's not about the specific firearm. It is about the caliber of the firearm and the amount of damage that it can cause. And when we look at concealed carry and home defense, your rounds that you purchase, your firearm that you purchase may look different for all of those locations, because they're different environments that are going to affect where that bullet is traveling, because we are responsible for that bullet wherever it goes, and whatever it does, we are going to be in court for that. So, you know, again, the education piece is so important for everybody, and you're not going to be okay if you just shoot the bad guy coming in. There are many considerations happening.
And I think you talked about 2 things that are really, really important. I mean, from a neuroscience perspective, also I will share, I was a Cub Scout leader, and they actually made fun of me, and I was the only woman, and they said, beware the Pennsyltuckian, because I was a better shot than the men. That said, I can guarantee you, if I were scared, my shot's going to go high and right like nobody's business. It is, you know, I think that's the important thing about getting this training is you can be a really good shot, but until it becomes absolute muscle memory, when you have that fear and your body naturally, the amygdala hijacks happens, which pulls, you talked about women are fine motor, your body naturally pulls blood and everything from your fine motor to your gross motor when your fight or flight kicks in. So when you're scared, I can tell you, if I'm scared, I'm not hitting anything. I would need a shotgun. The other thing you hit on that maybe you can expand on a little bit. One is, you know, how we get enough training to actually make sure we could reliably hit something. So it's not high and right out of there, but also knowing where you live. Where I live, there are a lot of people in townhomes, and choosing the correct gun with the correct bullet to not go through this wall and kill my neighbor is really important. And people without training, you really don't know that. And to Vanessa's point, at a bare minimum, everybody needs to know how to turn a safety on and off, because you could find a weapon at any time. But so sort of how do we, you know, take those things into account? We know how much training is enough training, and how do you pick the right weapon?
Before you go into that, we're going to do that on our after show. Jody, right now, what I want you to do is let the people know where they can find you and your website, and what classes you have coming up next, because we're at the 8 o'clock hour. We'll continue that question on the after show. You guys can catch that a little later, but can you go ahead and tell us really quickly your information so we can catch you?
Sure. So everybody can go to girlonfire.life. Instead of .com, it's .life, because we're the Girl on Fire lifestyle of personal safety. And we have on our firearms training page, we have all of our classes. We're constantly adding new ones as we find a demand in certain areas. Like I'm in 14 states, and so I'm in demand in a lot of places. But if I know that I've got a group in a certain area, we can create a class just for your group. And so if you've got maybe a women's group somewhere here or there, we'll just put one on the calendar and we'll get it done, because I want to make sure that especially women are trained and trained in a good way. So girlonfire.life is the primary way that you guys can see our courses, as well as contact us if you have specific questions. Maybe you're in a situation and you need some of those resources. If you click on contact us on that website directly, we will get that message and respond as quickly as we can to make sure that we're helping, in any way we can with personal safety.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being part of the show today. We would love to have you come back at a later date. I know you have some really great projects on the horizon. So you know what that is. We talked about that. So when that happens, I want you to come back and talk about that with our audience, and then give us the information so we can support you in those efforts, okay?
Well, thank
We
you.
want you to announce it on our show first, Jody.
Yep.
Okay, I'm on it. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, tell everybody, we will see you all next week. Thank you for watching.
Bye, everybody.
Take
Happy
care.
spring break to those on it, and happy Easter.
Oh, yes.
Oh, next, that's next. Yeah.